Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back from break. Just before break, we heard from FADA from Barcelona about the unprecedented expansion of their program, taking people experiencing homelessness with animals from street to home. With the help of a grant from their Ministry of Social Services, they are able to not only grow their program to reach all of Spain, but the scope of their programming is expanding to all vulnerable populations with companion animals. This is what government funding has the power to do. FADA has been able to show that what they are doing is a public service worthy of being as broad and far-reaching as possible, and their government agrees. The human-animal bond is worth protecting and preserving for people in vulnerable circumstances. At My Dog is My Home, we are looking forward to a near future where there are similar conditions in the United States. And we are lucky to have with us today one of the champions that is using their seat on Capitol Hill to help create those conditions. Congressman Jason Crow is a former Army Ranger and Bronze Star recipient who grew up working class. He worked minimum wage jobs during high school and enlisted in the National Guard and worked construction to help pay his way through college. After graduating, he joined the active duty Army and served our country in Iraq and Afghanistan. Even when he rose to the rank of captain, Congressman Crow always remembered what it was like to march in the boots of an Army private. For Congressman Crow, this is the essence of servant leadership, always putting the needs of those you lead ahead of your own, and it continues to drive his approach today. When he returned home, he looked for ways to continue to give back. He struggled to get his veterans benefits and knew others were having similar challenges transitioning from service to civilian life. So he went to work helping veterans across Colorado. Now he has taken his servant leadership to Congress, where he represents Colorado's 6th Congressional district. Whether combating the climate crisis, creating better, higher-paying jobs for hardworking families, or preventing gun violence, Congressman Crow is focused on putting Colorado and our country ahead of politics and partisanship. Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman. You are incredibly busy, and it is so meaningful that you would take the time to address us and talk about policy solutions to address the gap in services for people experiencing homelessness who have companion animals. We are eager to hear from you, so I will hand things to you, Congressman, and I ask everyone who is watching to please give your warmest virtual welcome.
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate the welcome. Appreciate everything that you do and My Dog is My Home does. It's really good to be a part of this CoSheltering conference. And I want to give, first of all, I want to give you, Christine, a shout out for being such a good partner to my office and Peter Trapp on my team at helping develop the PUP Act, the Providing for Unhoused People with Pups Act. You've done a lot of work to help us get this bill to where it is and help move it forward. So thank you for that support. So this bill and my effort around this area really came about from engaging in the legislative process and really its purest sense. There's a saying that all politics is local. Well, there's nothing more local than your daughter when you're an elected official. So my daughter and I were actually driving around Denver one day, and her two big issues are the unhoused and animals. And she noticed that a lot of the folks on street corners, a lot of people on the interchanges that were unhoused had pets. And she really got choked up about it, and we started talking about that issue. And then fast forward to her being in Washington with me about a year and a half ago. We met with my legislative team, and we started talking about that issue that she's very passionate about and what we could do to address it. So Peter and Christine and others, we started to research the issue and found out that a huge gap was the lack of availability for pet-friendly transitional housing and sheltering for our unhoused. So this bill is actually pretty simple. It would provide a grant program to help our shelters and transitional housing facilities retrofit and become compliant so that they could also bring our unhoused animals and companion animals off the streets and into shelter, which is actually pretty simple. It would make a huge difference because as this group knows, and I'm preaching to the choir here in its truest sense, as this group knows, we have to make sure we're protecting our animals. but a lot of folks are just simply not going to go to a shelter or go to some place where they cannot bring their companion, their member of their family in many cases. So this closes an important gap that we think is worthy of bipartisan push, which we introduced last Congress with bipartisan support. And we're going to work with all of you in this organization to make sure that we build continued momentum around this effort and eventually get over the finish line. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you all. And I know we're going to have a chance for a little bit of Q&A here, and look forward to that.
Yes, thank you, Congressman, for being with us to talk about the PUP Act and to also answer a couple of questions. So My Dog is My Home applauds you for your leadership on this issue and for recognizing the important role that animals play in the lives of people experiencing homelessness. We have a number of people in our audience at this conference who are either people with lived experience of homelessness and also have a companion animal, or they directly know or work with someone who has lived experience of homelessness with an animal. And it's incredibly validating for our community when a Congress member sees us and our issue, or a Congress member's daughter sees us and our issue. So especially since other systems consistently reject and minimize this relationship. And that's essentially why we hold this conference, because we need a space to meet, to change that narrative from one of being, you shouldn't have that animal, or this isn't something that matters in the larger scheme of things, or we've got bigger artichokes to fry, who cares about the animals? Animals are a part of our chosen families, and the people who are the most vulnerable need that consistent support more than anyone. And again, we appreciate that you see it. So now we do have a short period of time left with the Congressman. And if you have questions or comments for him, please drop them in the Whova Q&A window. And while people are getting their thoughts together, Congressman, I have a few questions for you myself. So the PUP Act permits HUD to award grants for interim and permanent housing that accommodates individuals or families who are homeless and have pets. I think the inclusion of permanent housing is really critical here because it recognizes the long-term solution to actually ending homelessness. I know you're a proponent for affordable housing. I've read your recent press releases on the funding you secured for your district to build permanent supportive housing, which is fantastic for your community. Can you talk about the importance of permanent affordable housing in ending and preventing homelessness? And more specifically, your thoughts on pet-friendly, permanent, and affordable housing.
Yeah, Christine, absolutely right. And I mean, I couldn't have said it better than how you just laid it out. I mean, this is a continuum of care. And we obviously want to make sure that we're getting folks off the streets and into that transitional temporary housing where they get the wraparound services they need, where they get the care that they need, whether that be mental health, job counseling, education, healthcare, you name it, in many cases, all of those things, but then set them on a path to permanent housing. We don't want temporary solutions here. We don't want to continue to just throw money at the problem and see somebody back out on the streets a year or 2 years down the road. We want to make sure we are setting their life on a very different path permanently. So structuring this bill the way that we did imagines that continuum and that long-term investment and making sure that we get people off the streets, we give them the care that they need, and then we keep them off the streets and help them, on a path to success, which of course means that we account for their entire family, their chosen family. As you said, I love that phrase, right? We have to make sure we're looking at the entire family for these folks, which is anything that anybody would do, right? I mean, I've had pets all my life, and I would just never abandon my pet. I just wouldn't do it, and nobody on this Zoom would. And if we're out on the streets, you're not going to do it either. So making sure we take that into account is really fundamental to this effort.
Thank you, Congressman. So exact demographics of the population of people experiencing homelessness with animals is somewhat difficult to pin down at this time, even though we do have some general broad statistics that we can cite. But anecdotally, there seems to be an understanding that veterans experiencing homelessness are very often caregivers of companion animals. I know that you are a veteran yourself, and you are very involved in veterans' issues. Is this something that you have also personally observed in the veteran community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge correlation between veterans' homelessness and PTS from that service experience. And what the data show very clearly is that companion animals are one of the best ways to address PTS and the anxiety and some of the residual impacts of that service. It just helps a lot of vets, and we see a huge increase in service animals and companion animals with our particularly younger veteran population. There's no clear illustration, in my view, the need to account for companion animals and service animals in housing than when it comes to our veterans. And obviously, I take this very personally as a veteran myself. That we have an obligation to our fellow veterans to make sure we're giving them the care that they have earned and they deserve given their service. And I will say that extends to our service animals as well, our military service animals, and making sure that we're caring for them after their service ends, right? After they take off their collars, so to speak, right? That's something that we've been paying a lot of attention to. And along those lines is also the issue of animals that were abandoned during the evacuation of Afghanistan. The 124,000 Afghans who we evacuated in August of 2021, many of those folks left their animals behind as well. So we're paying attention to that issue and trying to figure out ways that maybe we can break down some of the regulatory barriers and prohibitions that get some of those animals out and ultimately reunited with their families if that's possible.
Wow. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of questions about that particular effort in the chat. Thank you for bringing that up and for tying everything together. So I believe it's still hard to draw that definitive line between homeless veterans and the positive and therapeutic impact of animal companionship, but there's an emerging evidence base. It's strong. I also think it's really common sense that helps us deduce that a veteran who may be struggling to reintegrate or adjust to civilian life might find the non-judgmental, non-verbal connection that they find with an animal very comforting and potentially even life-saving. The Biden-Harris administration has declared ending homelessness among veterans as a top priority. Do you think there's a way for the understanding that many veterans experiencing homelessness have pets make its way into the approach, maybe not as a specific strategy in and of itself, but perhaps as a lens to add to that strategy that they have already outlined?
Yeah, I mean, if I understand your question, I think it goes to my prior comment that we have to be looking at this issue, holistically and account for the unique aspects of the service experience and why a lot of our veterans are encountering the struggles that they are. And the Biden-Harris administration obviously takes it seriously. They've declared this a priority, the veterans homelessness and mental health issue, and they've been putting a lot of resources behind it. I mean, I signed a letter to help create the Wounded Warrior Service Dog Program, which goes to this as well. And to my last point, addressing some of the Afghanistan impacts as well, we've seen a surge of mental health crisis since the end of the war in Afghanistan, and paying attention to the unique aspects of that, which are different from other elements of the unhoused crisis and mental health crisis we're facing in America. Some of them are the same, some of the aspects are the same, but some of them are different and unique to the veteran experience.
So you've done some other interesting work around pets and housing, not all of it legislative, but still using your seat in Congress to move the government to be more inclusive of companion animals in its housing policies. Can you talk a little bit about your effort to curtail exorbitant pet fees in public housing?
Yeah, so I co-led a letter that would push back on these large pet fees, which of course hit our most vulnerable and lower income folks the hardest. When you have these pet fees that actually become a barrier to affordable housing for many families, then that reverberates for their economic mobility, for their ability to be in good school districts. It just has so many secondary and tertiary effects on the well-being of those families that it all, in some cases, originates from the barrier of these pet fees. And again, it comes back to this is part of folks' family, right? The dog, the cat, whatever it might be. My kids have salamanders, actually, in addition to a dog. So we are a alternative pet family in a couple of ways. They're essential to the lives of my children and our family. And we certainly wouldn't live in a place where we couldn't bring those family members with us.
Okay, thank you. So I will try not to monopolize all of your time, although I could probably ask you questions all day. So we do have some other questions in Whova from our audience members for you, and I'm just going to read them out to you. This is an interesting one from Wanda. So Wanda from York, Pennsylvania, she would like to know, would you entertain getting involved in the emotional support animal debate? Many providers of healthcare and mental health care won't write letters for emotional support animals across the board, and it feels discriminatory.
That's a good question. I'm not aware of that debate, and I don't know why the providers are doing that. So I'd love to work with your organization and whoever asked that question to see why that's the case. I personally haven't experienced that in my VA advocacy and working with the Veterans Administration and the mental health providers. The people that I've worked with have been very aware and very supportive of emotional support animals. So it would be interesting for me to hear more about why there's pushback and what that debate is really about.
Yeah, thank you. Artesia, I know you have your hand up, and I saw your hand up in the last session and I didn't get to you, so I want to make sure I get to you. Artesia, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good morning. Oh, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm California time. Congress Crow, I thank you. Thank you for your services. I work at LASA, and I used to work for Volunteers of America, and I am so connected with veterans. So I appreciate your services. And you are so right when it comes to housing veterans. Why are they the main ones who are overlooked and don't get the services that are needed? I also want to know, is it possible, can you speak to Congresspeople in California and show the need of why veterans need to be housed with their animals if they are, if they do have an animal attached to them? Because to me, and I'm speaking for self, me being in the field and noticing why some veterans have issues with people, I've noticed they trust animals more than people. A lot of veterans who are homeless, because you can't have an animal enter the home, how is it that we could set up some type of meeting to discuss that? Because to me, that looks as if it kind of eliminates the homeless population. Not saying that it would completely get rid of it, but it will help out if we're pushing the need to know, how can we get with Congress people out here? How can we get with, city council members to advocate? No, we need to have the housing units accept homeless people with their pets, especially if they are veterans. And then it'll be a lot of more funding coming our way as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for those questions, Artesia, and thank you for your work in this area. With respect to veterans being overlooked, I think in some ways they are, in some ways they aren't. Right? I mean, there is a lot of focus on veterans care and veteran services and our veteran unhoused. So I think in those instances they're not overlooked, but in some ways they are because of the stigma of the veteran experience. There remains an enormous misunderstanding about what the veteran experience looks like and means, right? And we are a society now where very, very few people have served in the military or even have a military connection, right? Less than 3% of our society has served in the military, which means then pop culture informs their views. And pop culture, unfortunately, has perpetuated this myth that veterans are violent, their veterans are unstable.
Yes, I agree.
There's no data. It sounds like you know this, Artesia. Like there's no data that shows that veterans are somehow more risky, more violent than the rest of the unhoused population. It just doesn't exist. So breaking down those myths are really important. And then I'm happy to talk to members of the California delegation and ask them to sign up to help. But I'm going to ask for your help Everybody on
Okay.
Zoom, everybody on this Zoom should go to your member of Congress and be like, sign on to Jason Crow's bill. So I need
Please,
your help.
please, please. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah, we
much.
have Kentucky congressman now.
Thank you, Artesia. I appreciate the question. Thank you, Congressman Crow, for your answer. I know that you have to get over to committee, so we have just one last question, which I hope can be answered in 10 seconds. What can be done to incentivize landlords to allow tenants to have pets? For those that do allow pets, what can be done to incentivize them to do away with breed restrictions and unreasonable pet fees that make it challenging for people to locate and afford housing that will allow them to keep their entire family together?
Yeah, great question. So there's a letter, I alluded to this earlier, that's being led by Adam Schiff and Corey Bush that would encourage the curtailing of those exorbitant pet fees by landlords. So that would be one that I would encourage you to ask your members of Congress to also sign on to that effort to add additional voices to it. We are limited in some ways, though, because land use policy is largely the domain of state and local governments. So there are restrictions and limitations to what we can do from our federal perch here regarding land use and landlord-tenant laws. But certainly looking at grant programs, looking at HUD regulations that pertain to those, that will be important. And we'd love to work with your organization and identify additional ones that we should be looking into and paying attention to.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. So thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be with all of you. Thanks for the invitation. I enjoyed it. And I really appreciate your partnership in getting these things across the line. Thank you, and have a good morning or afternoon, depending upon where you are.
Thank you so much.
Bye.